All right, welcome to Bet the Edge. I'm Jay Croucher here with Drew Dinsick. Massive weekend in sport, Drew, with Olympic Marseille defeating Clermont Foot on Saturday, closing the gap on PSG. We'll talk about the Super Bowl, but wanted to start by thanking everyone who tuned into our NFL Honors watch along on Thursday night. We had over 12,000 people tune in, which was great. Sorry we couldn't get Kyle Shanahan home for everyone, but outside of that, it was pretty good results with a lot of the bets that we talked about during the year, with Nick Bosa at 8-1, DPOY, Geno 20-1, comeback player, Sauce 14-1, D-Roy, and then Mahomes at plus money. So if you put an even amount of money on everything that we gave out, you would have come out in front. But Drew, the big one for me anyway was Kyle Shanahan, and that was a gutting loss to lose that to Brian Daboll, and that was bad, as you would have seen if you watched the long live. But what was worse, Drew, is the following day, I flew home from Phoenix to Newark, and sitting directly in front of me on the flight home was Brian Daboll. The fellow was reclining right into my space, almost off my ballot. Which added further insult to injury. But what's worst of all is that basically every single person on the plane, or at least it felt like that, outside of me, asked Daboll for a selfie.
Oh, of course.
And so I'm sitting directly behind him, trying to recoil out of every selfie. Everyone's going up to him saying, "Congratulations on the year, coach. Congratulations on winning coach of the year. Well deserved." Just over and over again.
Rubbing it in. Just really grinding it in. Oh my God.
But and you know what the worst part of all is that he seems like the loveliest bloke in the world.
Yeah, for sure.
He took the time with every single person who came up to him. He was, he was engaging with his kids and everything. He just seemed like a lovely dude, which somehow makes it worse. Also, he's the head coach of the New York Giants, who's just been flown out to Phoenix for an award. I would have thought maybe they'd charter a plane for him or something. But anyway, he was on my United flight, and a man of the people, Brian Daboll. So congratulations to you, Brian. No hard feelings on the kale salad that hit the ground. But anyway, let's talk about the Super Bowl, Drew. What'd you make of it?
A gigantic exhale, sigh of relief with the result. I had a pretty big stake on the Chiefs to win at plus money. All of the things that I felt like were X factors that could have made it just an easy, sweat-free night were completely wrong. Jalen Hurts' shoulder, it looked good. His deep ball, it had touch. His intestinal fortitude in the moment of a giant game for the first time didn't seem to faze him at all. His first half was absolutely superlative outside of the one fumble. And as we sit back, like, you take that play out of this game, I don't know that we're talking about this being a happy moment at all, because you're probably looking at a 17-point deficit at halftime, and things are all of a sudden a lot trickier about exactly how you come back in that spot. I think, realistically, it's not lost on me that, when asked, Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes had every single answer that they needed to get their offense going. Like, their mismatch against the Philly D, particularly just from a conceptual level, was pretty obvious from the first series of the game all the way through to, the consistent scoring that they put together in the second half. I'm glad we saw it. We knew that was an angle, and that if this got into a shootout, I wasn't going to feel out of it until the whistle had blown. With an 8-point lead, I felt a lot more confident than I should have, because again, Hurts, what are the Eagles going to do if they go down in this game? And it's the last 4 minutes. What are they? We're just going to score a touchdown, and then we're going to have an absolutely spirit lifting 2-point conversion. So I was nervous then that the Chiefs were going to either score too quickly and or just settle for a field goal and give the ball back to the Eagles, who had a chance to kind of put one on the board, put 6 on the board and win the game. But deep sigh of relief here. I still think the market was not correct when we were talking about it for the majority of our run up. We were talking for a lot of this time we spent, the 2 weeks prior, Philly in the -2.5, -1.5 range. And it closes a pick, basically, even odds at some of the market making spots. I think realistically probably was fair. Maybe it should have been shaded a little bit towards KC because of Mahomes, but ultimately, I think the general idea of what's a fair price, we were on the right side there, and the ball bounced in the direction of the Chiefs.
Yeah, I think when you look at stuff like Kevin Cole, who has Substack, I think, which is really good. He does stuff like expected scores based on EPA, and he had the Chiefs winning in terms of like expected score, winning by 5 points. And I think a lot of that is that we got the fumble 6 touchdown just randomly out of nowhere, but that was on a 3rd and 5, and if Hurts just takes the sack there, he's punting back to KC. And then the big thing is that the Eagles went 13 out of 20 on 3rd and 4th downs, and a lot of those failed 3rd down conversions didn't matter because a couple of them because they just got the 4th down conversion straight after. I think when you look back on the game, I do think the Chiefs played slightly better. I think that the Eagles, a lot of the stuff that we talked about around experience and playing from behind, I think that did rear its head a little bit in the 4th quarter, where Sirianni, who had been throwing a perfect game with decision making in terms of aggressiveness, he makes the blunder. I guess
so glad you brought that up.
Cost themselves 2 points of win probability, 2 percentage points by punting on 4th and 3 from, I think, their own 32-yard line, I want to say, instead of going for it, where all the math said they should go for it. And then, just defensively, they had just no answer for Mahomes all game. No answer for the Chiefs' running game either, which was hugely efficient. And sending the blitz on the Sky Moore touchdown, I think that was a great call in retrospect. And then also, I thought, and this is like no one's going to think about it because they ended up scoring, but I thought when the Eagles equalized to make it 35-all, that drive, the Eagles were taking so much time off the clock on every single play. They were taking it down to 1. And it's like, guys, there's a good chance you're going to have to score twice. And it just felt like they kind of lost their way a bit. And then they get bailed out because L'Jarius Sneed blows the assignment on Devontae Smith. But I don't know, there were a few things like that, which I really didn't think the Eagles were going to score when it was 35-27. They were just running the ball so much. But ultimately they do. And then Mahomes comes down the field, which, I think it's such a perfect summation of the legend of Patrick Mahomes, at the key play, the holding call, which we'll talk about. But to go on that scramble, it was like a 25-yard scramble where he's outrunning Eagles pass rushers, just looks exactly like the Patrick Mahomes who was doing those scrambles for fun against the Titans in prime time and just winning the game that way. But did you think that was a holding call? Do you agree with James Bradbury? Or do you think that that's a no call?
Man, that's one that happens in the middle of a game, in the middle of a season, and you shrug. You're like, all right, I guess so. Like, okay, fine. There were more egregious penalties in the game that they didn't call, which was kind of weird. There was a little bit of we're going to let them be physical at the cornerback position, I felt like, all game. And then to decide all of a sudden on that play that you were going to call it by the book to the letter of the law was a little weird. As a Chiefs backer, I was like, literally, oh my gosh, this just sealed the game. Like, the game is now over. Holy smokes, I can't believe they called that. And because, like I said, I was sweating that they were going to settle for a field goal with way too much time left, which it looked like they were. And then they were going to give, the Eagles would have had one timeout and minute 50 seconds to either get the game time or to go ahead and touch. I was terrified. Mahomes was that.
Yeah, it looked like it did feel that if they were going to kick a field goal in that spot with a minute 50 left, it really did feel like the Eagles were going to come down and win the game. But let's just take a quick look at all the closing lines, how everything ultimately settled. A lot of movement from the openers. Obviously, open KC -2.5, and then flips through 0 to KC +1.5. I will still never really understand why America, and and it wasn't just points bet, it was well reported across the board that the Eagles were the popular bet, which I just didn't understand. Like, whatever you think about the game, I would have thought that people were just going to back Mahomes, but they didn't. And then the total moves 4 points from open and then sails over regardless. And really from the opening drive, it was never really in doubt. Couple random things that I'll remember from this game as a Chiefs backer, and I think you only really remember this stuff when either it's your team or you've bet on the team, but stuff like Mahomes when they're killing clock and McKinnon slides at the 1, which he absolutely should have done. Mahomes gives up about 5 yards trying to kill clock at the end, or it's like, do we really want to give up all the 5 yards, Patrick, for an extra kind of 3-4 seconds? Like Harrison Butker missed the 42-yarder, barely snuck in a PAT. I'd rather kind of stay a little closer. And then also, I think the NFL at large needs to figure out these last-second plays, because between what Dallas did against San Francisco and then the Hurts final play, anyway, I think that's very in the weeds, but I think that's the kind of stuff you remember when you got a heavy position on one team.
The stuff I'll remember is kind of, I love those calls. A couple that'll stick out for me are, number one, the lack of aggressiveness of Sirianni when it mattered the most was kind of surprising. You mentioned it, the decision to punt on 4th and 3. Now it looked even worse in hindsight because that was the one where they busted the big punt return and basically set up the go ahead touchdown, right? But even more than that, earlier in the second half, they take the delay of game penalty and then settle for the field goal on 4th and 6. Which was a little, that was the first sign of, he's fine making a one-score game against Pat Mahomes. Don't know that that's going to work out in the long run. It was 24-21 at the time. Again, we're talking that, they take the delay of game penalty on 3rd down. I mean, they use a timeout instead of just taking the penalty and then turn around, do not convert, and then kick the field goal instead of going for on 4th when they're, well inside the 20. So that was surprising to me. And ultimately, because to that point in the game, it felt like, this is what the Niners Chiefs Super Bowl would have looked like if you had a more aggressive Shanahan, right? Like that was kind of the way it felt that it was playing. And then he kind of lost his nerve a little bit with sticking to sort of the plus EV ways. So, otherwise credit to him for outstanding game plan. I think the Eagles broadly were, I thought they were really, really well prepared. Their scripted offense in that first drive was like, oh God, good God, this is good stuff. Like this is the good stuff. They are going to shred if this is the way that they play. The slippery field neutralizing the pass rush for both teams was interesting. I'm going to remember that for sure. The Kenneth Gainwell, everybody's celebrating Kenneth Gainwell first touchdown, and then actually it's not a touchdown, and then Jalen Hurts getting his touchdown for the first score was pretty funny. Some of the random wild outlier props all hit, like the doink on the attempted field goal hit, a defensive score hit. There were a lot of sort of outlandish, wild, weird props that were cash that were fun. And and I'm going to remember the halftime show where, I really enjoyed both the first and last song. Thought they made some great decisions there with what they picked. And overall, just very cool to see Rihanna, perform with, expecting. And that was a cool halftime show. So those are my major takeaways and my memories there.
Nice. Let's quickly take a look at some of the most bet props in the game, and a lot of them cashed, and that's what happens when a Super Bowl puts up 73 points. Kelsey, anytime touchdown scorer, he scores the first Chiefs touchdown. Jalen Hurts, anytime, which in retrospect feels crazy that it was minus 115, given he scored 3 times. AJ Brown gets in as well. Not as good news for Miles Sanders, who did nothing in the game. I think my main takeaway is one will be just the feeling in the first half that the Eagles are kind of playing a different sport. And I think often you feel that about like Mahomes, but just the Eagles, the combination of the offensive line, Hurts' rushing threat, and then Sirianni's aggressiveness. It's like, well, why doesn't And it's not as simple as why doesn't every team treat 3rd down and 3 as 2nd down and 3 and just going for it, using that play to get you closer. It really did feel that they were just unkillable because they had this extra thing where they're just going to go for it every single time. And it's not easily replicated, but just Sirianni ultimately, even with the costly decision at the end, he still added 9% in win probability just with his decisions to go for it on 4th down. Yeah. So I'll remember that, and Sirianni just feeling like he's not going to make a bad decision, and then ultimately he does. And then also just Hurts, where, I mean, it's not going to get lost in the wash because it's a Super Bowl and he played so well, but Hurts really kind of missing any doubts. Like, there's going to be no question about whether Jalen Hurts is a big game player. But I think ultimately the legacy of the game will be just the inevitability of Patrick Mahomes and seeing him limp off the field on the last drive of the first half, and immediately the line shot Eagles -5 to Eagles -9.5, just based on the vision of him limping off. And then at that point, it just felt like the game was done because the Eagles, they go down, they go up 10, they're -425 on the money line at halftime. And everyone who, I'm sure you're the same in all these text threads, all these other people who are on the Chiefs being like, it's over, it's over. It's like, well, let's see what Mahomes looks like on the first drive, because they're getting the ball back after halftime. If he looks like 80% and they score, then it's game on and we've got a Super Bowl. And he obviously marches down the field. And then, the second half for the Chiefs, 3 touchdowns and the game-winning field goal, and Mahomes was just pristine. So I think that'll be the main memory for me.
Okay. So you brought up some fun things. So you're saying that the strength and health group for the Chiefs deserved more consideration for MVP. However they rehabilitated him at halftime, got him back out there, that they deserve some consideration. That's fair. When Nick Bolton scored his second touchdown that ultimately got wiped out, that was a fun moment where you're like, oh, could he? 2 defensive touchdowns, all of a sudden, could he steal MVP here if the Chiefs win? That would have been wild. And then, lastly, we always kind of talk about MVP in respect to like, well, yeah, he'll get it if his team wins. And even if they lose, he still has a chance. I thought Hurts outplayed Mahomes. That was my general read watching the game. I thought in general, he made the more impressive throws. I thought in general, his execution in the red zone, more of it was on him as opposed to just like brilliant play design. That like the Mahomes touchdown passes to Sky Moore and I can't remember the other one that was just like wide open. Kadarius Toney. Yeah, Tony and Moore. Like that was just brilliantly schemed. Like you don't really need the best quarterback in the NFL to make that pass, do you? Whereas when it was inside the red zone, so much of it was like Hurts, like you go get this. Like this is on you. No one else is really helping you. Your prime running back is, injured on the first play. He's not going to help you. So I thought in general, Hurts was the more impressive of the 2 quarterbacks. And if that kind of effort, breaking rushing touchdown records as a quarterback in the Super Bowl, if that doesn't get you much consideration for MVP, then, I don't know that a losing quarterback ever really has a chance.
Yeah, well, I mean, the market definitely agreed with you live to an extent towards the end of the game. Hurts's MVP price live was actually shorter than the Eagles' money line, where there was some thought that maybe this could happen. I think that Mahomes he's 21 for 27, 182 yards, 3 touchdowns, no picks. And to me, he had a 96 QBR, 132 passer rating. He adds the 44 yards on the ground, including that 26-yarder to effectively win the game. And to me, what will maybe not be remembered as much, but feels super significant right now, is 0 sacks. And that's the thing. Against that pass rush, I know the field hurt. I know the O-line played really well, but to take no sacks with that ankle and make plays under pressure as well. Some crazy passes, one to Travis Kelce in particular stands out. I thought that Mahomes, he was magnificent. And I would agree that Hurts probably outplayed him if you take out the fumble 6. He literally handed 6 points to the Chiefs, which it's a fluke play, and it's not going to be what he's remembered for in this one. But I thought Mahomes, I thought he basically played into a draw, and
Okay.
to make the play at the end. So
Okay.
anyway,
Maybe I might be a little slanted because the Eagles offense had 20 more plays. Like they've just there was the disparity in time of possession and overall like opportunities was it was wild to watch. And I guess the fact is, if you hold the Chiefs to that little time of possession in those few plays, you can't be conceding 38 points.
Yeah, and look, as Dan points out in the comments, the Eagles pressured Mahomes on 35.5% of his dropbacks, higher than their season average, and 0 sacks, which I think just speaks to his ridiculous pocket awareness and the greatness overall of.
Jay, would you say that sacks are a quarterback stat?
I say they might be. They just might be.
Amazing. All right. We learn something new every day.
Let's talk about the NBC Sports Predictor app and then look at futures for next year, which are all out. So just a reminder, if you don't have that NBC Sports Predictor app, go download it now. The contests are free and easy to play, and you have a shot to win thousands this weekend by predicting what will happen in the Premier League, where my Gunners, with Cesc Fabregas watching on behind me, are starting to let it slip, and college basketball. So yeah, that's day after the Super Bowl. So what better time to talk about the Super Bowl and the futures markets, which some surprises to me in this. Anyone leap out to you, Drew, as value for the NFC or for the AFC or for the Super Bowl?
So it's going to be tough. It always is. It's tough to divorce yourself from what you just saw when you have two teams play that well offensively. And then you think about, well, next year, it's like every year after the Super Bowl is over, I feel like in the afterglow, you're like, well, yeah, these two teams are just going to run it back. Like that's probably how this goes. Well, the main takeaways were these two teams largely got here because they got themselves buys. For the Eagles, that was afforded by a relatively soft schedule. For the Chiefs, it was a matter of like their prime competition in division. The quarterback got hurt for a huge chunk of the season, and those things aren't guarantees to happen again. So it's going to be tough for both of these teams, I think, to get the 1 seed just based on what they have in terms of more difficult schedule and just in general, like the AFC being so competitive. For the NFC, if you were to tell me that the Eagles are going to run the NFC for the next 4 years, I'm not going to put up a big fight about that, because they seem to have the quarterback position figured out, and the rest of the roster building from Howie Roseman and what he's found in Sirianni, like it all is perfect. Perfect fluid motion. Like everybody is in lockstep here. And this is a well run organization. So the idea that the Eagles will be back in the next 3 years, I think that's pretty high confidence play. I don't know that it'll be next year because the Eagles have two things that I think affect them negatively besides schedule being tougher next year. The first is they're losing Shane Steichen. And the second is I think they're going to stick with Jonathan Gannon. So of your two coordinators, you probably would have liked to maybe upgrade defense.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know what Jonathan Gannon was exactly trying against the Chiefs, but whatever it did, it didn't work in a variety of different ways. It felt like in the first half, they're like, well, let's let Kelsey beat us in single coverage, and that didn't work out at all. And then, didn't get a single stop in the second half. I agree. I don't understand why the Niners are favored for the NFC over the Eagles. I think that is wrong when you consider that the Niners quarterback is either going to be Brock Purdy coming off a UCL, who was great, but was also still the last pick in the draft, which you still have to regress to a tiny little bit over the 6 or 7 games that he played. And then Trey Lance, who is still a great unknown. I like it. As high variance a piece as Trey Lance, who has a fair bit of downside, can be favored over this Eagles team. I think the Eagles should be favorites in the NFC. I think there's only one Super Bowl bet to make at the moment, and it's tough to even say out loud. But
Lions.
I think the bet is the Cleveland Browns at 45.
Oh, Jay.
Yeah. 45 to 1.
Oh.
Top 4 quarterback in the NFL last time he had when we last saw him in Houston. I think there's so much upside in that team still. I think as well that they underperformed a ton based on kind of the expected metrics, and that defense should be better. I think Stefanski is a really good coach. I still think they have a top 3 offensive line in football. They can make some additions too. I just think 45 to 1. Like, how are they less likely to win the Super Bowl than teams like the Raiders? Even like if Aaron Rodgers is there, like that team has so many weaknesses on defense. Why are they less likely than? I think they have more upside than teams like the Rams, who not in a great spot at the moment in terms of how they can upgrade their own team. So I think Cleveland 45 to 1, which is a bet that's not fun to make. But when you look at non-quarterback, that team is absolutely stacked, and that quarterback has upside to be a Super Bowl winning quarterback, which we've seen. So you're out on the Browns.
I'm not look, if we see something in the first half of the season that is markedly better fit between Watson's skill set and Stefanski's offensive vision, then I will change my tune quickly on them, because you are right. If you get top 4 quarterback play with the rest of the talent on that team, you should not be priced in the 45 to 1 range. No way. Like, you're alive. The problem is, I think everything that Watson does that's good doesn't exactly fit perfectly with sort of the rest of the ethos of the Browns. And I think in general, you don't have a ton of chemistry between what he brings to the team and the existing leadership in that locker room. And so if winning cures a lot, if they're coming out of the gate and they're playing well and they're winning, then I think, they come together. It's cohesive. They're going to have a nice little season ahead of them, and 45 to 1 is going to look amazing. But I am very buyer beware with the Browns. I thought you were going to go with the Lions. The Lions in the NFC at 12 to 1 would have been the only look I would make. And that's largely just because the nucleus of wide receivers is so talented. That is a really, really talented squad. Offensive line also solid. Jared Goff doesn't seem to be impacted much by the situation he's found himself in. And then if they can add some more pieces to the defensive side of the football, which I think would probably be your expectation of going into this offseason, pick up a guy like Bradbury. Bradbury is going to be a free agent. I don't think the Eagles can sign him. Bring a guy like that into the fold, and I think you're talking about a true contender and a very winnable division. And so I think if I had to call it now, you're probably going to get Eagles Lions NFC title game, and it could be in Detroit. And then on the AFC side, ridiculous not to expect Mahomes to be back in the AFC Championship game. And you can pick any one of like 4 or 5 teams that I think realistically have a shot to be there against him.
Yeah. The issue with Cleveland, outside of all the issues in Cleveland, is that, you've got to go through Patrick Mahomes and Justin Herbert and Joe Burrow and Josh Allen to get out of the AFC. But I just think that, they've got the same Super Bowl odds as the New York Giants. Like, that's not right. Like, the Cleveland has so much more upside to actually win the Super Bowl. On the NFC side, which is much more wide open and less anchored by all those quarterbacks I just mentioned. Again, not the most inspiring bet, but the Vikings are 20 to 1 to win the NFC, and they bring in Brian Flores. There's a ton of talent on that offense. I think that it's weird because they went 13-4, but I think that they underperformed, not in terms of their record, which was fraudulent, but just in terms of what they put out in the field. There's a lot of talent on that team, and they shouldn't have been an 8-9, 9-8 team based on their point differential, whatever they ended up at. I think that team still has a fair bit of upside. Maybe there's not a ton of upside in Kirk Cousins, but I think of the rest of the team, and that defense should just be better with Flores, with making some additions. I think that it's a really well-run team as well, very analytical, which we always like. And I think that at 20 to 1 in a weak division, and a relatively weak conference compared to the AFC, I think that's maybe a touch too big.
Okay, so 2 quick thoughts. I agree with your sentiment. Like, talk about a franchise. I absolutely, love the direction that they're going. Flores, I thought, was a tremendously good hire. Not a lot of talent on the defensive side of the football there. And I think they're probably going to get bet against pretty heavily in the futures market. So again, here we are, middle of February. Anything you're trying to get down today or even this month, you are literally just trying to stay one step ahead of once win totals open up, once draft capital, once that is known, once free agency is matured, you're trying to capture equity on teams that are going to be hot in the early part of the market cycle. And the Vikings are not one of those teams. I think they're going to be bet against pretty aggressively because of the sort of the standardized wins, close wins type of, stuff. Pythag versus actual, people are literally going to look at them like this team's going to fade. They're going to come back to earth. And on top of that, they have a bunch of defensive holes. So I think that the key really is let the price on the Vikings like fall, and then come get it on like September 1st, right? Whereas the Lions, I see in the other side of the coin, like people are going to get more and more excited about the Lions between today and the start of the regular season. So you might as well grab it if you have any kind of inclination to ever bet the Lions. And on the AFC side, the team that's going to get talked up, that's going to rise, that's going to shorten in price, that you want to capture equity on now, I think it's the Jacksonville Jaguars. I think the Jaguars, because the AFC South is so weak, you're going to have 2 rookie quarterbacks, maybe 3 rookie quarterbacks in that division against Trevor Lawrence, who now gets to add Calvin Ridley to the fold with the rest of those weapons. Doug Peterson, another year, and second year under the system with Doug Peterson. They're going to have to make some moves defensively, offensive line shuffling, in order to make the salary cap work. But I still think the Jaguars are probably going to kind of wind up in that. They're going to flip the Ravens almost certainly in that price. They may flip the Chargers just based on how the fact that they're in a division that's so winnable, and the Chargers have to go through, KC. So I think the 2 teams that are likely to rise in the in terms of capturing win equity, it's going to be the Jags and the Lions, in my opinion.
Yep. I like the look on the Jags in particular. I think the issue with the Lions is that as bad as Minnesota's defense was, Detroit's was even worse this season.
Yeah, that's true.
Detroit had youth. Detroit had youth on that defense in a way that Minnesota don't to the same extent. So there's upside down. I like the look on the Jags just because Trevor Lawrence is a generational prospect who's going into year 3, and he has, the upside to be, if he next year did what like Joe Burrow did this year, I don't think that would absolutely shock anyone. He's got that upside. Yep. All right. Before we talk about the association, a reminder to download the RotoWorld app to receive breaking player news all season long. Stay ahead of the competition by favoriting players on your roster. Get the latest injury updates, player news, and much more delivered right to your phone. It's available in the App Store today. All right, it's basketball season now with NFL behind us. Massive slate of games. I actually watched, one of the 2 games yesterday. Boston-Memphis was a great appetizer for the Super Bowl. Jaren Jackson, defensive player of the year front-runner, fouls out in 20 minutes in a game they get lit up in as he is vulnerable.
Did you see the stat shot? I mean, the score, box score?
Yeah, 0 blocks.
Zero
blocks.
Because he was on the road.
Just saying. So you have massive slate of games tonight. I think some of the highlights: Nuggets at Heat 1-point favorites. T-Wolves at Mav, kind of an interesting one. We see the new look Mav. A play-in extravaganza between the Lakers and the Trailblazers. The game I'm most interested in is the Nets and the Knicks. Little New York showdown about an hour from me. This Nets team is fun. And I'm not sure how they're going to score or get any kind of creation of shots, but defensively, I think the rest of the way that they project to be a top 3 defense in the league. The team's absolutely stacked between Claxton and Bridges and DFS and Dinwiddie's not amazing defensively, but he gives you size. Royce O'Neal, Ben Simmons, who can't do anything on offense, but is still an excellent defensive player. They're a fun team. Anything you like on the card tonight?
Yeah, Brooklyn goes hard. I like Brooklyn to win against the Knicks. That is, I make that game almost a pick 'em, slight favor to the Knicks, but at +2.5, I'm involved in the Brooklyn money line there. I went to war with our beleaguered Minnesota Timberwolves. I took the 7.5 points there. The market is way too hot on this Dallas Mavericks team. Okay, they got a little shot in the arm because they made a move. Like, let's cool our jets here, guys. This is not some sort of powerhouse in the Western Conference. So 7.5 for me with the Timberwolves. And then the last play on my card, I'm looking. I know I had 3. I laid it with wait, no, I didn't. Indiana. Sorry. Indiana versus the Utah Jazz. That one opened Indiana slight favorite, moved to a pick 'em. Some places the Jazz are favorite. I don't think that's the correct direction. I think the opener was fair, so I'm the buy back there on the Pacers.
Yep, that's my favorite bet tonight is the Pacers. I don't think the Pacers are as bad as they've shown the past couple of weeks. I mean, they were playing really well before Halliburton went down. And this Jazz team got rid of Mike Conley, Malik Beasley, Jared Vanderbilt, and added nothing outside of maybe Russell Westbrook if he doesn't get bought out, which he surely will. So this team has got no depth whatsoever. I think Lauri Markkanen as well is having to take much harder shots now that there's no creation and no Mike Conley around him. It's a big difference going from Mike Conley as your point guard to Colin Sexton for the most part. And that's why I think he's a little vulnerable now and most improved player. And I think our man Jalen Brunson, who's still 10-1 some spots, and looks like by the end of the season might increase his points per game by 8-9 points in the New York market, which just gave Brian Daboll Coach of the Year. I think Jalen Brunson is very light for that. Anyway, we go full circle from last sour grapes on Brian Daboll. Reminder to check out NBCSportsEdge.com for more information to help you with your wagers. Thanks to those watching on the NBC Sports YouTube channel. And if you're listening to us in podcast form, don't forget to subscribe and rate us. From Jay Croucher and Drew Dinsick, hope you had a good Sunday and good NFL season. Thanks for watching along. We'll see you next time.